Okay. So, as I said, mic's off and camera's off if you don't want your face on because I am recording. Secondly, if you have pen and paper available, that would be great because as I'm talking, questions may come up. So I encourage you to write things down. What was my other reminder? You could always write questions on the chat box. Sorry, it's Friday. And I'll look at them as we go. So first and foremost, thank you to Sean Robinson and to the brothers of Beta Beta Pi chapter of the Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Inc. at SUNY Oneonta. Sean is an alumni from one of the schools where I used to work when I was in the DOE. That's how I started my journey in social services. So who's the self-specialist? I'm the self-specialist. My name is Mercedelli Graciano, also known as Mercy G. My mother would call me Mercedelli. I'm a mental health counselor and a self-published author. I self-published my book in 2019. I've been writing since I was 12 years old. And that's how ultimately I became my journey as a self-healer and the self-specialist. And in turn, it just allowed me to be here with you today. I traveled the world of entertainment through a former career in dance, choreography, acting, modeling, and TV production. So I got my BA from CUNY Lehman, and my bachelor's is in mass communication. I loved television. I loved what I did. However, at some point I wasn't willing to sell my soul. And so I gave it up in my mid-20s. And unfortunately, we were in the middle of a recession. So I didn't find work right away. But thanks to my supportive family, I was okay. I always wanted to work for a community in need. And one day I got a call to interview as a parent coordinator for a school in the Bronx. And I did, and I got the job. And here I am today, right? So what happened in that job is that I learned the deficiency in emotional intelligence and how our communities as a whole need so much help and education when it comes to the topic of mental health. So essentially, I went back to school and I got a master's in mental health counseling. And because of that, I was able to learn so much about the mental health process. And I think what helped me a lot is that I had already seen so much. And so the self-specialist came about. And in an effort to help people become the best version of themselves, my main drive is self-love with an understanding of self-awareness, self-care, and self-control. In my own words, it all starts from within. If we're able to look at ourselves and ultimately resonate with ourselves, we're able to become a better us. But for that, you have to be present. Sorry, Sean's technical difficulties is battling mine. So here we are, sorry. So we have to normalize what selfish means. Being self-centered and selfish is actually not a bad thing if done in a healthy way. To be self-centered is to be grounded, and to be selfish is to establish boundaries. So what does that mean? That means that you have to be self-aware of who you are. You have to have self-control to know when to start a battle, when to end a battle, when to not give energy to that battle. Have enough self-love to understand that perhaps that particular situation has nothing to do with you. And being self-centered enough to understand also that a lot of the things that may be going on around you are just a manifestation of what's going on around you. So maybe you should learn from those things. But what happens in our communities? In our communities, we're taught to suppress emotions. So we often hear, do you want me to give you something to cry about? Or in Spanish, ¿tú quieres llorar con gusto? And culturally, what we're teaching our children is you're only hurting when it is visible that you are hurt. So we're telling our children, whatever the reason that you're crying for is not enough. So I'm going to physically hurt you so that you can cry for real. So instead of us asking our children, what's wrong? Why are you crying? Why are you upset? We tell them to stop. We tell them suppress your emotion. There's no reason to cry. But if you want to cry, I'm going to hit you. And so essentially, we start this abusive behavior that we didn't even know we have because it's culturally taught. So a few fun facts. So for men, their frontal lobe matures in their mid-30s. And a lot of times, or oftentimes, what we tell our men is men up, don't speak up, don't be vulnerable. Vulnerability doesn't have a strength, and really it does. When we actually change the narrative for our men and we teach them that speaking up, and communicating is healthy, we change the dynamic in them. And if we don't do that, then they become emotionally constipated. And for our women, we develop in our mid-20s. So that's a 10-year difference. And for us, it's usually you're emotional, you're volatile, you're too communicative, you talk too much. So what happens? In turn, she might become a bit emotionally constipated as well. So when we combine these two, we have relationships that start off the bat with issues because the man doesn't talk and the woman talks too much, quote unquote. And instead of letting them know it's okay to speak, we actually hinder the process. So we have two emotionally constipated individuals. So the male suicide rate is actually 3.7 times higher than females. And again, we go back to the suppression of emotions. Men feel so many things because they're not just men, they're human. And they're unwilling to share these things because there's no safe space for them. Because as a culture, what we have done is tell men up, don't speak up. You're doing too much. You're a man, don't cry. And that's not healthy. In essence, what happens is that they suppress so much of it that we start the mental health issues. So essentially, now you have partnerships once people grow up, and those partnerships only work when people listen to each other. That's why things like therapy is so important, because if you seek therapy, the minute you see an issue, it is quicker to get out of it. But before we get into that, let me talk a little bit about overwork and multitasking. So multitasking essentially is the art of paying attention to nothing but handling it all. I do not believe in multitasking. I did when I was younger because that's just what we do. But what happens when we multitask is that we become burnt out, we become stressed, we become anxious, and essentially depression kicks in. So again, conversations about mental health that no one is having, because as a community, as a society, this is how we operate. The harder you work, the more you get. Well, if I'm working all the time and I'm not practicing self-care, and I'm not sleeping enough, I'm not eating right, I'm not spending time with my friends, whatever your self-care is, then are you really doing what you need to do? Are you really getting out of that work the time that you need? Probably not. And then we build relationships while we are overworked. So now we have layers. So we have layers of how we were raised. Remember, don't cry. You want me to give you something to cry about? Do you need to lash out? Why me? You're a child. Don't cry. And now we become teenagers, or we become adults, young adults, and we're running on this, don't feel your emotions, but you need to work hard. So a lot of times what happens is that we dive into work, and we allow work to, quote unquote, pan out how we feel. And the more work we produce, the stronger we are, right? And then we get into relationships. And what happens in these relationships is that, unfortunately, we create lack of communication, sexless marriages, abuse, and we bring all this trauma and baggage that we have dealt with since we were little. So what is trauma? If you put it in the scientific term, trauma is any specific event that overwhelms the central nervous system, altering the way we process and recall memories. And so oftentimes this leads into a panic attack. So for me personally, do I have a lot of traumatic events? Not that I can remember, right? But this one stands out. And what happens is that when any particular individual brings up this individual, says a name, or I hear a song, or whatever happens, my heart starts beating really fast. I start shaking, my hands get cold. I grab my phone to call someone, but as I'm looking at my phone, I don't even know who to call, because now the trauma response is the process of altering all my memories, blocking my central nervous system, and I am no longer me. Now I'm Mercy under a panic attack. And you meet me and I'm the healthiest person, but I'm human, and things trigger me and things happen. So that's how I want you to think about yourself. You are human. Things trigger you. Things have happened to you. So be self-aware enough to understand what's going on. Be self-aware enough to understand how much of yourself you're giving into these things, and how much are you willing to give into your relationship. Essentially, we build codependency by way of contempt. So I'll break that down. Codependency. We're taught that, well, the old school mentality, you can't break up with your partner. You have to stay there, you have to stick it out, you have to figure it out. That's what happens. As a community, as a society, that's what our parents come with. And we stay in relationships where the two people, remember, emotionally constipation, right? Emotional constipation. So these two people are emotionally constipated. They can't talk to each other. Their trauma is triggered, but they can't get away from each other. And what happens with the codependency? I can't leave you, you can't leave me. We pay these bills together, we make these children together, but I hate you, I can't stand you, and I would rather not be with you. And so the contempt begins. If you think about your partner's name, and the first thing you do is roll your eyes or take a deep breath, you're building contempt. Contempt is the feeling of perhaps not wanting that person around, but not knowing how to get rid of them. And so the sexless marriages begin, or sexless relationships. And a lot of these things could be attacked through therapy, but the conversation has to start. The conversation has to take place in a way where everyone's comfortable, where everyone is acknowledging the issues, and where everyone is willing to put in the work. Because if not, ultimately what happens? The children suffer. A lot of people stay together for the children. A lot of our community stay together for the children. And really and truly, that's probably the most unhealthy thing we can do. simply because not only can children detect what's going on, but two unhappy people in one household doesn't exactly work. If you put two people in two different households doing their own thing, and everybody is channeling the best version of themselves, then that's a more cohesive way to do it. I'm not saying that it will be easy, but it'll definitely be easier to raise your children if you're able to build this awareness of self-love. I love myself enough to understand that this particular relationship is no longer working for me. And I'm going to in turn teach my child that you don't need to stay with someone in an effort to work things out. So the mental health in youth, the mother wound, the father wound. What does that mean? So I don't know if you guys have read on social media, but there's some posts that speak to the fact of forgive your mother for the mistakes that she made, or forgive your father for the mistakes that she made. And that comes from the mother wound and the father wound. You've also perhaps heard something to the effect of, oh, you date people that resemble your parent. Do you know why you do that? Probably not. You're trying to overcompensate for things that you didn't get as a child. So you look for the same characteristics that your parent exhibited in a partner in an effort to make things right within yourself for yourself. And I'm not saying that that's wrong, but we need to be self-aware enough to understand that if we're looking for these traits, what are we looking to get out of them, right? So for instance, if you come from abusive parents, you usually get into an abusive relationship. Why does that happen? Because that's the only way we are able to operate. If you're able to find the abuse that you grew up with, then all of a sudden that's your comfort. And all of a sudden that's the only way you're able to operate, because you don't understand anything outside of the climax that a dysfunctional situation brings you. Or perhaps talking is a trigger because you grew up in a home where everybody was emotionally constipated. And so when your partner or anyone is trying to speak to you, what happens is that you can't process, you block anything that has to do with listening, and you're no longer willing to be part of that conversation. So how do we change that? We have to change the narrative. We have to teach our children how to do it differently. We have to start advocating for your children, for our children. So let's say your children is acting out in school and they call you right into the school. All of a sudden, now you're mad at your child. And I've seen it because I was in the DOE for 7 years. So parents would go in, and I'm not saying that it is wrong or right. I'm just explaining what would happen. The parent would come in and they would start yelling at the child and take the side of the adult. Okay, no problem. And then I would see parents who would take the side of the child and dismiss the adult. So there's no real conversation happening. A conversation is where you let everyone speak, and it's just an open forum for everyone to get it out. The proper way to do it, the most proper way to do it, which is what I saw, is to allow everyone to speak and take in what the information is. And with that information, you decide what the best decision would be. So your child is acting out. Why is your child acting out? A lot of teachers would target the child and tell the parent, you need to evaluate them. And I wouldn't say that that's the healthiest way to do things, especially in a community where mental health is not something we speak about. So the healthiest and the more productive way to do things is, oh, do they act a certain way at home? Because this is what they're doing here. Okay, well, we have some services that perhaps can help along the process, and we can identify ways to help them. A lot of times, what parents see is, you're targeting my child, you are going to start a record on them, and we're already in the minority. So not only is my child a minority, but now you're going to label them as crazy. And that's not really what it is. In the school system, there's labels for everyone. Your first label is your name. And then the way you learn. So I think it is healthy to give everyone space to learn the way they learn. And if your child needs medication, then what kind of medication? Fun fact. In NY, the physicians prescribe Ritalin for ADHD, and that's not the right medication. A friend of mine actually moved to Florida, and it was then that she discovered that Vyvanse is the name of the medication, is the proper medication for kids with ADHD. However, the medication costs $1,000, and Medicaid is not willing to pay for it. So what did this amazing doctor in Florida do? She prescribed it one time, they denied it. She prescribed it a second time, they denied it again. So she told my friend, don't worry, the third time they will ask me why, and I will tell them he's allergic, and we'll take it from there. That's exactly what they did. The child was placed on the medication. Ritalin would make the child drowsy, would make the child not act like themselves. However, Vyvanse changed the game for this child. They were alert, they were themselves, but whatever needed to be tweaked in their brain, in the neural system, so that they could act accordingly, was working fine. So we need to, as parents or as future parents, learn how to advocate for our child. That is probably their first lesson in self-love. My parent was able to stand up for me and teach me how to do things properly in an effort to get me to do things properly. And in essence, what we do is teach our child how to process. Because if your child cannot process their emotions, then we're continuing the cycle of emotionally constipated individuals. So when parents refuse to have their child evaluated out of fear of what that means for their child, the labels, the records that creates, if you are an advocate, you teach them how to have these conversations with the schools, with the doctors, and in essence, ultimately teach their child how to advocate for themselves, but it starts with the parent. So how do we change the narrative? How do we normalize the self? How do we teach our children how to become emotionally spoiled? Sean, change the slide, please. Again. Maybe I need some water. Hold on. Next slide, Sean. Having a little bit, again, technical difficulties. Bear with us. Here we go. So we need to normalize prioritizing the self. Being self-centered means that you know where you stand. Being selfish means that you have boundaries in order to protect yourself. So you teach your child that advocating for themselves is the proper way to do things. And not in a rude way, not this is me and this is how I do things, but well, this is how I've learned to do things, and this is what's most comfortable for me. And I can't do that you're telling me to do because that's not comfortable for me. And then you create a conversation and a dynamic of what the boundaries are. And then my favorite, emotionally spoiled. emotionally spoiled, I came up with this sometime last year, is the art of being raised around and with so much love and support that you never go for want. In essence, this is the unwillingness to tolerate anything less than what you know you deserve. Also leading to your standards being set so high that you let others know how to treat you without having to say a word. So that doesn't mean don't talk. That simply means that if someone is ultimately paying attention to who you are, then there's not much you need to say. Or they will ask the right questions in an effort to make you feel comfortable because they are paying that much attention. So in the effort of giving you some statistics when it comes to mental health, and I think that throughout this pandemic, what has been the most difficult thing to look at, suicide rate. So the population in the USA as a whole is roughly 329 million people. So the numbers I'm going to give you as far as percentage would be in the 100,000 individual rate. So not the entire population, but as 100,000 individuals. So the healthiest state is in the tri-state area, and it's New Jersey with 8.66% of suicide rate. And the least healthy state is Wyoming, 25.8. Suicide rates among Hispanic, Black, Asian, Pacific Islander individuals are significantly lower than the rates among American Indian, Alaska Native, and white individuals. By age and gender, the highest suicide rate is among males 65 and older, followed by males 45 to 54. Among females, those ages range from 45 to 54, and those are the highest, and they're followed by ages 55 to 64. So we're talking about the suicide rate being highest in the older population. And these are things that you're perhaps like, what are you even talking about? We don't see these things on social media. Well, you have to remember that older folks don't really have social media. So who's publicizing their suicide in social media, right? However, remember how I started the conversation as a community, the emotional constipation. Men are told, don't speak up, men up. And women are told, you talk too much. So the suppression of these emotions and the cycle that starts in a household is ultimately the damage that entails what these numbers that I just shared with you are. And the reason I speak of suicide is because are there other mental health illnesses? Absolutely. But not treating these mental health illnesses is what leads to the suicide. And as we know, suicide is the ultimate end. And I'm actually getting goosebumps as we speak, because to this day, as a mental health counselor, as a brain physician, right? Emotional physician, we still don't know why suicide happens. We don't know what triggered these thoughts. Studies have been conducted since the beginning of times, and we still don't have an answer. So we don't know how to prevent it. We don't know how to start the healing process, because once someone is gone, there's no way to speak to them. And do they leave a trail? If you're paying attention and you go and look at it, absolutely. But if you're not paying attention, then you don't really see it. Oftentimes, these people also hide it so well that there's no way to look at it. There's no way to see it. There's no way to pay attention. There's no way to heal it. There's no way to target it, because we don't know where to start. So as a community, how do we begin the healing process? You have to talk about it. You have to change the narrative. You have to encourage self-love with an understanding of self-awareness, self-care, and self-control. I'm not saying that it's easy. I'm not saying that this is something I personally do on a daily basis. Trust you me, I work on myself every day because the progress is something you never stop seeing. The self is something that changes every day. Every day we wake up, our molecules are brand new. Every day is an absolute new day. So you have to start talking about it. You have to encourage being different. You have to give the space for someone to not only be themselves, but love themselves. And how do you do that? You don't judge. You create a safe place. So, how do you create a safe place? The worst thing you can use in a safe place is TMI, too much information. Because at that point, you're shutting the person down from giving you all the information they have within them to feel better, or all the information they have within them to allow you into their space. So, whatever it is, whoever you are, just listen, because that's how we start the healing process. Ask the right question. I encourage self-help, but not everyone can do that. So, do you need help? How do you find the help? Therapy is usually what I go for first. What does therapy mean? You have to shop around for your therapist. So, as a woman, my gynecologist has to be someone I'm completely comfortable with, because I am opening my legs to this person and showing them the most intimate part of me. So your therapist essentially has to be the same thing. You're allowing your therapist to be not only your best friend, but be the person that sees the most intimate part of you. And that is the only way that therapy will work, by the way. So I encourage people to shop around. Just because, I don't know, Miss Rodriguez on Dykeman is the person that your insurance pays for, doesn't mean that that's the person you need to go to. As long as they're licensed within New York, you're okay. Do they have to be accessible to you? Absolutely. You have to see this person once a week. So not only do they need to be accessible to you, but you need to be comfortable talking to them. I'm sorry, my throat. You need the H2O. So you need to be able to speak to this person. You need to be able to open up to this person. Therapy has to be something fun for you. Therapy has to be something you want to go to. It's not like the dentist. I hate the dentist, but I need to go because I need things to be right. You gotta love the smile, right? So I have to go to the dentist. So my therapist has to be someone that I want to sit with every week. I always encourage my patients to write down throughout the week after they see me, because we speak for about an hour once a week, but then you have to decompress or put into work whatever tools I gave you for a week, and then come back to me the next week and tell me how that worked out for you. And then we have to devise ways to make that work for another week and another week and another week until practice makes perfect. And now you're the best version of yourself. So journaling. Remember I told you I started writing when I was 12 years old, or probably a little earlier than that when I used to write in my journal. But as a poet, I wrote my first poem when I was 12 years old. And that's how I started my self-healing process. So as adults, how do we reprogram our brain to start the healing process? I encourage you to start writing. I encourage you to start leaving yourself voice notes. This is how I feel. This is what I'm not able to deal with today. This is how I would like things to be. And you start manifesting like that, by the way. So then when you find this therapist that you shopped around for, you're able to sit with them, and you could either play these voice notes for them, or you could read these journal entries. Because a lot of times we meet a stranger, we don't know what to say, we don't know how to say it, we feel vulnerable. But if you read everything you've already written, you're giving them all the tools and all the information they need in an effort to help you get better. So that's the therapy part of it. I encourage exercise to my patients because it improves mood. What happens with exercise is that it induces and increases the blood flow and the blood circulation to the brain. So think about emotional constipation and think about the suppression of emotions, which is what we do as a culture, as a society. We hold in so much. And when you're going through things, that's ultimately what your brain is doing as well. Your blood is clogged. Your blood is unable to flow properly because not only do you have all these thoughts, but you're overworking, you're multitasking, you're in a sexless marriage, you are in a mode of robot, right? Robotic mode. So if you exercise and you start getting that blood flowing, essentially what you're able to do is feel better. You're releasing. You are allowing the process of your body to do its thing. So now we have therapy and we have exercise. Oh my God, you're working double time. Best thing ever. Self-care. I encourage massages. I encourage meditation. I encourage yoga. Yoga, meditation, it isn't for everyone. You have to be at that place. You have to be at the right time. It's not something that everyone can do. That's okay. But everyone enjoys a massage. When you're able to sit silent or lay silent on a bed and just allow someone to help you release all that stress, you're already dealing with your mental health. Stress is by all means a part of mental health, and people don't understand that. And the last thing I would say is not even last, the second to last, a family member or someone you trust. So remember what I said, you're in therapy, you have after therapy an entire week to process everything you've been through. So how do you do that? You journal, great. You exercise, wonderful. But if you have someone to speak to, listen, this is what I went to therapy for this week, and this is what I shared with them, and this is what they told me I should do. That person can be your wingman. That person will book the massage with you. That person will exercise with you because essentially you're teaching this person that you love yourself enough to take care of yourself. So now they're willing to put in the work with you. And now they're taking care of themselves as well. And so we start changing the narrative of, oh my God, but so-and-so went to therapy and so-and-so is exercising. I want to do that too. And as a last resort, a lot of people need it, but they don't have the best side effects, right? Medication. A good way to deal with mental health issues is to combine medication with the therapy. Because if you're taking the medication for depression or anxiety and then you're going to lay in bed, that's not exactly working. It's working because it's sending the right signals to your neurons and your brain is able to process these things. But if you're not going to therapy and you're not talking about how perhaps the medication is affecting you or how the medication isn't or is working for you, then you're not really doing much for yourself. But I encourage medication in the event where you are really at your lowest point and you're unable to bring yourself back up. But it's not something that should be frowned upon. A lot of times they make us gain weight. They make us act a certain way. And by what I mean with act a certain way is they make us shaky. We become unfocused, we become drowsy. But remember what I spoke about when it comes to children and ADHD and how Ritalin is what they give them. And what they really should be giving them is Vyvanse. Advocate for yourself. This medication is not working for me. I need either a smaller dosage or a higher dosage, or that brand just doesn't work for me. Google is your best tool. If you're able to Google a pair of Jordans, or I don't know, what are the kids wearing these days? Yeezys, then you're able to Google what kind of medication works best for you or what side effects a certain medication has. So now when you go to the psychiatrist to get this medication, listen, I heard that these are the side effects and I'm prone to those things because I felt them before with something else. And right. So you are able to advocate for yourself. You're able to practice a little bit of self-love in that way. So all of that is part of changing the narrative as a community. All of that is part of starting the conversation of self-love, self-awareness, self-control, um, and allowing the process of self-worth to be ultimately your driving force. Uh, as a community, we're taught you have to work hard because that's the only way you're going to get somewhere. And we have allowed multitasking and overworking ourselves to be the deciding factor to our self-worth. But the way you walk in a room, the way you present yourself is ultimately the first thing that people take from you. When you walk into an interview, they've already seen your resume, but why are they inviting you in? They want to see you, they want to see how you carry yourself. So if you walk into this interview, some of you are finishing school and now you're going into interviews. What are you doing? You're showing up hurt, as you kids would say. You're showing up hurt because you haven't gotten enough sleep, you're working a lot, or you are on Instagram all day and you're not able to present your best self. So I encourage rest. I encourage doing nothing one day. I encourage self-care in the simplest way. Do nothing. When someone calls you and wants to invite you somewhere and they tell you, oh, what are you doing today? And you're like, nothing. Also, come out with me. Nothing is something. I'm pretty sure you've seen memes on that. Nothing is absolutely something. So again, how do you change the narrative? Self-love, self-care, self-awareness, and self-control. So I don't see questions. I'm going to assume that no one has questions on these matters.
If anyone does have questions and don't feel comfortable speaking the questions, feel free to type them in the chat. I'm also going to type a question in the chat for anyone who wants to answer this question to kind of gain a little bit more engagement. So feel free to answer the question if you like. But we do have one question in the chat, Mercy.
Yeah,
and it says,
Brianna,
what are the best ways to initiate? Yeah.
Go ahead.
What are the best ways to initiate a conversation with your parents and family, especially cultural and or non-African American, non-American backgrounds? Sorry.
That is, I got goosebumps, girl. Let me tell you. So it's a lot of times to our parents, we say things and they feel triggered, they feel targeted, they feel like they're not good enough parents. And I think that you have to start from there. When I spoke about the mother and father wound, we have to understand that a lot of our traumas and a lot of the adult we are today is a child that we were once upon a time. And the people who framed that were our parents. And we have to forgive them first, right? So we have to present ourselves to our parents as human beings first. And any conversation, when you're bringing up such a tough topic, and I tell this to all my patients, is start with the good, and so that you could soften the blow when you bring up the hard stuff. So a good way to do these things and bring up these conversations about mental health, or I need to speak to you about the way you hurt me, is I understand the hard work that you put into raising me. And I am so appreciative of that. However, I would like to discuss with you these issues. So you told them you love them. You told them that you see the work that they did, but you target what's important, which is the way you're hurting or the way you would like to discuss certain things. Because the thing is that as a family, we create these mental health issues. As a family, we create these emotional constipation narratives. We're not heard. So the way to be heard is to advocate for yourself. You present yourself in a way where you say, you know what, I love you and I get it. It was hard for you and I forgive you for the pain, but the only way I can fix this is by coming to you and having this conversation with you. Does that answer your question, Brianna? Yay, wonderful. So describe the best you. The best you is in the simplest way, the best you is the only you. Don't try to appear to be something you're not. Listen, if you are in college and you don't like to go out, but your roommate likes to go out and you feel like I share a space with this person, let me push myself to do it, don't. That's not who you are. That's not where you want to be. The other day, this is the first time I'm going to mention him, which is crazy. My brother Harlow said something that made me feel so empowered. The reason I came up with the emotionally spoiled slogan is because I was raised in this very love, everyone on a pedestal, everyone is supported family and household. So my brother the other day said, for years, I thought that Mercy was a bitch. And as I become an adult, what I've learned is that she's just always been herself. And she's always set her boundaries. And she's always been assertive. And that made me feel so good because absolutely in arguments, it was always, you're such a, you know what? And with time, he just learned, listen, dude, I'm just not willing to do certain things because I need to sleep a little more, or that's what I want to eat, or I don't want to go over there. So in the simplest way, your best you is your only you. Don't try to mask or don't pretend to be something that you're not, to fit in or to make things go smoother, because ultimately what that will do is make you feel worse because you're suppressing who you really are. When therapy isn't currently available, what are some more in-depth ways to heal from childhood trauma, like journaling, but more than that, if that makes sense? That does make a lot of sense. Google. Google is not always the best tool, right? But one website that I could recommend is Psychology Today. So what happens in Psychology Today is that it's not only a website that gives you information on what mental health is and what the different issues may be, but it's also a forum. So people do have conversations and there is articles and research of what people have went through before. I don't necessarily recommend social media. Social media is not therapy, people. But I will say this, feed your mind what you seek. So what that means is follow pages that make you feel good. Mm-hmm. Follow pages that are ultimately manifesting things that you want. Mm-hmm. So if you broke up with your ex-boyfriend or your ex-girlfriend, you should not be following texts from your ex, because that's going to trigger something in you and you might just feel in the mood after a couple drinks to text your ex, and that's going to spike an issue. So that's not what you're seeking. You're seeking to get over your ex. So you have to follow pages that help you process that, help you heal, like the Self Specialist, which is my Instagram. But ways to help you heal is journaling, find someone to speak to, like I said, a safe space. If it's not a best friend, if it's not a family member, you could actually find groups that help you find your way. And what I mean is not like AA groups or anything like that, but clubs within school that share your same interests. What happens is that ultimately you start finding people that perhaps are going through the same thing and you don't feel so alone anymore. Brianna, you're on a roll. I'm loving these questions. Any other questions? Okay, so I won't keep you guys. I won't lie. I ain't gonna lie. I thought that I wasn't going to go through this smoothly, but I feel comfortable. Usually I go through this in an interview process, and it's much easier when I'm having a conversation with someone, but talking to myself, despite the fact that I have a minor in theater, this is crazy. Not a question, but more of a surprise observation that the suicide rate is higher among the white males. That might explain some of the recent events. Absolutely. As a community, we don't see what they're going through. I do live in Westchester County, predominantly populated by whites, and heroin is really high up here. Heroin use is really high up here. There's a lot of overworked parents who are not at home with their children. And so this starts a process of where's the parent working in order to maintain the mortgage that's probably like $2,300. So yeah, the disparity in that is it's a bit much. I don't speak on racial issues. I don't speak on politics, and I don't speak on religion. So that's why I gave you the information, and you're welcome to do with it as you please. You can research more on it, but I like to keep things light and sweet, not by not seeing them or by not talking about it, but I make mention and I keep it moving because my religion is love and I'm human. Okay. To see if I could connect you with a friend, she may need to hear your words. Absolutely. So right now we're going to give you all my information. I'll start by sharing with you guys my book, Sean. There you go. So The Awakening of My Senses is available on Amazon. You could either Google my full name, Mercedelli Graciano, or you could follow the links on my social media. So I have a little treat for you guys. I have not launched my website because I will be waiting for April 1st to do a hard launch, but I am doing a soft launch with you today. And Sean, next slide. I would like to welcome you to theselfspecialist.com. I'm smiling so hard because I'm going live today. For being here, this is my treat to you. I hope that you utilize the process. We love free stuff. I hope that you utilize the process accordingly, meaning that if it's not for you, that's okay, but certain areas of it may be. So what you will find in the self-specialist, as far as services, is that I will help you find the right mental health professional. So I'm not practicing at the time. What I am, however, doing is helping people find the right help for them. So we would go through a series of questions, and I would see what's best for you. What kind of therapy do you need? What kind of therapist do you need? You will let me know if you would rather a male or a female, if you would rather a certain ethnic group, if you would rather a certain age group, and we would take it from there. Because remember, advocacy, you have to shop around for the right fit for you. You would also find the way to book me for speaking engagements and motivational speaking. As you can see, I like to do things in a conversation way. I don't like to come up here and give you a ton of numbers because I'm not a mathematician. I am a mental health counselor. My hope is to get you to be the best version of yourself. And I believe that I can only do that by giving you key points. And ultimately, my most creative way to be at this moment is writing. So I will help you go through the process of self-publishing, which is what I did, and editing your pieces. And I will guide you in a way that not only makes it easy, but is a good fit for you. So I'll be doing some consulting when it comes to the editing. So finding the best therapist for you, speaking engagements and motivational speaking bookings, and self-publish and editing services. You could find me on Instagram at the Self Specialist, and my personal page is It's Mercy's World. And It's Mercy's World, you will find, more pictures of me, my poetry, and then the Self Specialist is significantly geared and only geared towards the mental health aspect of who I am. For yoga medication in POC communities, how do you think our communities can be more open to it? Not necessarily telling people to just do it, but explain it's an option, one that is culturally rooted in a lot of our cultures. This is more like an option question. Okay, so let me break this down because it's kind of long. For yoga and meditation in people of color communities, how do you think our communities can be more open to it? You have to understand that what yoga is body movement. And yoga is something that started in a colored country, India. So this is not something that just a certain ethnic group does. It was brought on to the United States by way of, but the more we learn about it, you know how many of my Dominican sisters are out here as yoga instructors? So the more that people like us begin to do it, the more that we'll be able to normalize what it is. So how do you begin the conversation? First, you have to understand that it's simply body movement. You're not doing anything that your body can't do. And we all have a body, right? So it's understanding that it's not something that's just geared to one ethnic group or one community. It's understanding that it's something that is a privilege to us all. So if we're able to take on that privilege and understand the process of what yoga is or what it can do for you, then that's how we normalize it and that's how we begin the conversation. I hope that I answered in a way where you could understand. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for allowing me into your emotional space. Again, you can find me on Instagram at the Self Specialist or at It's Mercy's World. I hope that you like my website. I hope that you can find a way to connect with me. I hope that I can help you. I hope that this has helped you. And I'm sending you a lot of love, a lot of kisses. Turn up because it's Friday. I hope that you guys all have a great weekend.
Yes, I just want to say again, thank you so much, Mercy, for being here and providing the insightful information that you were able to give to everyone. And everyone, I want to thank you so much for being here at 6 p.m. on our.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sean, for having me. I don't think you were here when I was giving my thank yous.
Myself and the rest of my chapter, and the deepest in my heart. Thank you so much.
I love you, boo-boo. All right, guys, go turn up.
No problem.
Bye.